Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Managers Community National Learning Day event. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping items to consider. Please note that due to bandwidth, it is possible that the panelists may lose connection and disappear from the screen. If so, please allow the system time to recover. During the event, you may submit your questions at any time by pressing the icon button with the person raising their hand located on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Also note that this event is being recorded and a YouTube video link will be made available following our session on our various social media platforms. First and foremost, the National Managers Community acknowledges that the land on which this event is being held is on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. I'm Isabelle Racine, the new Executive Director for the National Managers Community. I'm thrilled to have joined the NMC and I look forward to working horizontally with numerous partners. As a leader, I strongly support the idea that outreach, engagement, and collaboration are key to help strengthen the public service. In the past 8 months, the NMC has adapted quickly to the changes we have all faced as managers in the public service. In August, we launched a Managers Learning Needs Survey, which helped us shape NMC learning events such as today's event. For today's session, we will be discussing how to successfully lead virtual teams during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, with our special guest, Natalie Lahren, President and Senior Coach for P2 Pro Services, Inc. The event will be hosted by Marilyn Latzel, NMC Regional Lead for Ontario. Before passing the microphone to Daryl Nolan, VP Policy Programs and Communications, ECOA, and ADM champion NMC Atlantic, I would like to share a tip that has become important to me, especially over the last months. The importance of taking time to empathize and giving space to talk to each other, offering support, and learning to really listen. It's a real pleasure to join you for this event. Please share your thoughts and key insights on today's event on social media platforms using the hashtag #ManagingVirtualTeamsGC. And don't forget to tag the NMC. Now over to you, Daryl.
Merci, Isabelle. Thanks a lot. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I guess I want to start by really giving a kudos to the NMC for pivoting so quickly. I mean, we often do virtual events, but really pivoted and really embraced the sort of opportunity to have a bigger reach across the country that the new virtual environment is really providing to us. And I'm really proud of the work that they've done over the years in supporting some 40,000 managers from coast to coast to coast. And I know today's topic is going to be so very pertinent and interesting to people about managing virtual. Many of you were doing this before, but now most of you, if not all of you, are doing it. And what I've learned, I think what people have learned over the last period of months, which seems like years, I think sometimes, is really the need to continue to engage your teams. And we're engaging our teams now in different ways that we never actually engaged with them before. And some of them are actually improvements. Some of them are a little bit more challenging. But one of the things I want to give a little plug to the NMC about is they do have tools and tips and tricks that can help you. So this is one of those things, but keep connected to the NMC over the course of your career, because I know it's certainly been helpful for me, and I know it'll be helpful to you to learn from them. I guess some of the other things that we've learned about working virtually is how to set boundaries. And that's about how do we set boundaries between our work and our personal life. I know personally, I spent the first few months basically working out of an open concept kitchen living space. And even at night when I wanted to sit down and watch, the latest Netflix show, the computer was just over there staring at me. And I was never able to actually let go of my work. And I'm an ADM, and so I won't deny being guilty of this sometimes. But our senior managers, feel this. I found I was like sending emails to people at 10 o'clock at night and 9 o'clock at night, and not urgent emails, just because I was there. And we really need to find that break for your own self, but for your staff. And kind of one of the other most important things I want to talk about is, in my own personal tips, would be self-care. and really give your employees the space to look after themselves. But more importantly, you as managers, take the time to look after yourselves, because we all know if we're broken as managers and tired and exhausted, then we're not our best selves, and we really can't support others as well as we would like. So it's that long mental health tip that many of you may have heard is put your own oxygen mask on first before you try to help other people. So really take the time to look after yourself. There's so much stress happening in our lives. I have a number of DGs that work for me and others, and I was reflecting before this call of, over the summer when things were, getting super stressful, and they reacted to the whole COVID situation, each one in their own different way. And one of the lessons that I've learned from that experience was those of them that were having like a bit of a struggle in terms of coping with all of this stuff in this virtual environment, it was easy for that to slip by me and not notice it. And it was only really, well into the summer that I picked up on a couple of folks that this wasn't going well with them. The kids, the spouse at home, the tremendous workload that most of us had, because that certainly didn't go away during COVID, and trying to find a way to cope was very difficult. And giving them time to cope and recognizing that you need time to cope. So I'm sure when we turn this over to Natalie, she's going to have way more interesting and exciting tips for you. I'm excited to hear what she has to say. You're going to have a fantastic day today in the next little while. For that, I'm going to pass it over to Marilyn Lassell, who's with the NMC Ontario region, who's going to be our moderator for the day. So over to you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Daryl. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome. Thank you, Daryl, for the genuine tips that you shared. I think you made it real for all of us. And that's exactly what the point of today's session is. It is an absolute pleasure to be moderating today's session and to welcome our keynote speaker, Natalie Lahren. Natalie is a skilled coach, trainer, facilitator who specializes in helping others thrive. Through the power of her training, participants gain insight into their well-being, heightened sense of awareness, and the tips and skills to become better leaders. She brings a wealth of experience, both from the public sector as well as the public service. And she is here today to share with all of us the 3 themes that managers from coast to coast to coast have shared that are of importance to them: managing expectations, maintaining healthy work-life balances, and engaging our teams. And with that, I turn it over to Natalie and I welcome her to our engaging session. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn, and thank you, Isabel and Daryl. And I'll just take a moment for the slides to appear magically on the screen. But in the meantime, I just really want to say thank you also to Daryl for sharing your lessons learned and your tips. And yes, absolutely, I hope to just build on that and add a little bit more, but I think we're already off to a great start. So maybe, Marilyn, if you can give me a thumbs up, just confirm you can see the slides on the screen on your end. Perfect, great, we're good to go. So welcome, everyone. My name is Natalie Lahren, and I'm here today to speak to you about how to manage a virtual team. So Marilyn has already given a lot of information about me, but basically, yes, I am an internationally accredited coach and trainer. I've worked both in the nonprofit and in the public servant, and now I run my own business supporting people differently than I used to, but really specializing in mental health, well-being, and leadership development. My contact information is here if ever you need to reach out to me after the presentation because there's something I said that you want to follow up with me or have specific questions, please feel free to do so. So today we will be covering 3 things. The first, we will be talking about the strategies that we can use to manage virtually. We'll be touching on motivation and engagement, and we'll also be exploring boundaries and work-life balance. So like Daryl kind of pointed to, for many of us, that can be a big struggle when we are never leaving our home. So there's like that overlap between work and life, and we struggle to clearly define the two. So let's start with the first one, how to manage a virtual in a virtual work environment. So the first thing I'd like to offer you is a list of the most common struggles for people working remotely. These are collected by research, and as well as I'm sharing some comments that I hear often when I work with people. I've been working a lot with people, even more so during the pandemic, and since we've moved to virtual, and these are the most common things that we hear. So the first struggle is unplugging after work. You know, how can I just close down at 4 o'clock and switch roles, for example? Another big struggle is around isolation. So people are feeling isolated not only because of social distance, but also in terms of not being able to see people's faces, smiles, hearing. You know, we used to listen through the cubicle walls as to what's going on. We used to have a lot more meetings. We used to just connect. So they're feeling that isolation. There's a decrease in collaboration and communication. For many of us, we haven't quite discovered how to do that now. We used to not hesitate before to say, hey, let's go grab a boardroom and sit down and figure this out together. And now it seems a little bit more awkward, or it requires a little bit more effort, and it just doesn't feel the same. So a lot of us are not doing it. The same with communication. Because it requires a little bit more, it's maybe more in written format than meetings. It seems that there's been a bit of decline in communication. There's a lot more distractions at home, everything from pets to seeing the dirty dishes sitting there, the laundry sitting there, to having our spouse, our partner at home also, the kids at home. It just makes it so much more challenging to just be in work mode. Motivation. We've seen some ups and downs in motivation, and for some people working virtually, it is a huge challenge for them to get motivated, to get going, and to keep up a routine that allows them to perform at their best. Taking vacation. Why would I take a vacation when before I used to love taking a break so I could just stay at home and chill, or used to go travel, and now I really don't want to stay at home because that's all I do, and I can't really travel. So a lot of employees are not taking the breaks that they need just as much now as they ever did. And so that can be a challenge. Technology, access to Wi-Fi, good connection. How many meetings are we now having where we lose somebody mid-meeting, or we can't hear someone? Or, you know, there's this awkwardness of not really knowing all the functionalities there. Maybe technology was never your friend to begin with, and now there's just so much to learn. And I don't know about you, but I also hear a lot of departments haven't implemented training programs to teach people how to use MS Teams, or how to use Zoom, or how to use all of the other technology available to us when it comes to working virtually. Onboarding. Think of all the new employees arriving in government, or switching teams, or being reassigned to a different project. And they don't have an opportunity to even meet their manager face-to-face, or to meet their colleagues, to learn the culture of the workplace. Remember, that was a big part of onboarding, is to understand the culture of your team and workplace. So there's a lot of challenge there that we need to overcome when it comes to onboarding and making sure to retain the staff that we have. And another biggie is building and maintaining trust. I think trust was before really taken for granted as something that was just automatic when we see people and we work together. And now that we don't have those visual cues, or we don't have what used to seem like something that would give us trust, there just seems to be more challenge. The other thing too that has been shared is that for many employees, now their private space is being invaded by, and I know you can't see me, but quotation, invaded around now having a camera in their home when they're attending virtual meetings. So how can we create an environment of safety and trust even when we're working virtually? So knowing all these challenges, I want to explore some possible solutions, some best practices that have been researched and used for decades in other like private sector who have been working virtually for a really long time. So one of the first things is to still establish core hours. When we worked face-to-face, we had business core hours. We expected employees to be there no later than, for example, 9 a.m. and could not leave any time before 3 p.m. And now that people don't have to actually drive to work or come home, there's some flexibility in our schedule where we could work a couple hours in the morning and then take a couple hour break. And then, so there seems to be lacking that structure that a lot of employees relied on to get motivated. If you think of somebody who's worked in the same field for 30 years, has always had the same work hours, and then suddenly retires, how it's so common for them to struggle to get up in the morning and get things done because they don't have the structure they used to rely on. It's no different in this case. So if we don't provide that for our employees, for many, they will struggle. Now, it doesn't mean we have to be rigid that it has to be this time, but core hours help because then it allows you to also set team meetings and standards in terms of response time. Having some daily, weekly, or just set meetings. Because we no longer have visual cues or abilities just to share random things or to connect and to see how people are doing, having face-to-face meetings, I mean face-to-face using camera, is so important. And it doesn't mean just having meetings to without respecting people's time. It's about creating a meeting so that you can talk about tasks, you can talk about project progress, you can share new announcements, you can check in with people. But if it's a set time and it becomes part of one's routine and expectation, then you can ensure that there's a higher rate of communication, a higher rate of engagement, a higher rate of motivation, and people tend to show up. Setting professional standards. So when you hire somebody to work for you, there are some things that we teach new employees from, everything from what is expected in terms of what they wear, what's expected for them in terms of how they behave in a meeting. For example, when we're in a meeting, we turn off the ringer off our phone. We don't bring our laptop. We focus. We participate. Attendance. So there are standards we set. And for many of us, when we moved to the virtual world, we were just so overwhelmed by that we didn't have those discussions with our staff. So what are the standards that you need for people to adopt as their workplace culture? Do you want people to be free from distractions during a meeting? Do you want people to be engaged, to participate, to have their video on, to have face-to-face, so that you can set those standards the same way that you would if you sent one of your employees to present at a corporate committee? You would have expectations then. Why would it be different in a virtual setting? So have those discussions to determine what that looks like for you and your team. Have performance targets. Performance targets has always been part of work, and it's now even more important because for some people, that's what allows them to get up in the morning and to get stuff done. And more, what I'm hearing is that some people are kind of forgotten because they're out of sight, out of mind. And so they find themselves not having any work to do. And what used to be easy to overcome, let me take a step back. There's different types of targets. There's a short term and then there's a long term. And some people are maybe very used to working with long-term objectives when they're face-to-face because they're constantly seeing people work and being able to share. But now when we're working virtually, even those people sometimes need it to be chunked down a bit, to have more milestones so that they can report back on progress more often than they used to. And for you, a manager, to also get more frequent updates than you used to, because there's not those visual cues that we used to have. So really having some performance targets for everyone and to check in on individual needs and styles. Do they need more smaller breakdowns? Do they need to know what their priorities are for that week to support them to function virtually? And like usual, accountability doesn't change. We still have the same amount of accountability virtually than we used to. So, but the question becomes, what does that look like for you and your team? In terms of time management, and a lot of us are feeling it. What is time these days, right? Like some of us are confused if it's Monday or Friday or Saturday, and is it morning or evening? Because everything seems to merge because we're just not leaving our environments. And so being able to respect everyone's time and being very clear. So if we have core business hours and we have business standards, why not have also service standards? So what do you expect in terms of response times from your employees? What about urgent request? Time and time again, I hear the stories from employees who will say, like, listen, I sat in front of my computer for 3 hours. I finally say, okay, I've had enough. I need to go for a walk. I want to take my lunch break and do some dishes, or I have to tend to my kids' needs. And the minute I walk away from my desk, I get all these urgent requests and emails. And then because I didn't reply right away, they start to assume that I'm not working. And then the phone starts to ring, and it's very stressful, and it doesn't really nurture that trust that we really need in a workplace. So if we are clear as to what would be your expectations, do you expect people to reply within an hour to urgent requests? Because if I know that as an employee, then I know that if I step away, that I need to come back and check in by the end of the hour, top of the hour, to make sure that all urgent requests are taken care of. What are the response times for things that aren't urgent? Can I respond at night once my kids are in bed? Or does everything have to be responded to at 5 o'clock? So really being clear around that. And that goes to the second point, which was respecting everyone's time. Because we don't change our environment, we might need more breaks, more times to change, to move around. A lot of us are not set up with ergonomic setups, so we have to stand up, we have to move, we have to go for walks. So a lot of parents have kids at home. A lot of us are taking care of loved ones who are sick, those type of things. So how can we allow some flexibility, allow some balance, but yet have some clear expectations around time and standards of work? And that brings us to the last one, which is to make yourself available. When we were face to face, we would kind of pop our head over the cubicle and look to see if our boss was at their desk or if the door was open, so we could run in there and ask a quick question you might have, or just share something or say, hey, how's it going? And now we can't do that. And as you know, as a manager, open communication starts with the more social type of communication, not always the work related. So if you can somehow find a way to establish open office hours where people can just check in with you about any question, that would greatly help people, because then they'll know they can reach out about anything. And some tricks that I've heard is everything from having an online calendar where you allow all your staff to see, and you can block off time and say open office. Or I've heard strategies where managers will send an email out to their staff every morning saying, hey, my open office for today is 1 to 2. Those type of approaches can really support and nurture an environment of trust and openness and an ability to nurture even well-being. And so the research also shows to us that many remote workers feel the need to always be available and instantly respond any time of day or night, and weekend. I'm seeing that a lot lately, and putting in more hours than they should just to prove to the managers they're not slacking off. So when you start to notice that, I invite you to be curious. What might you be able to bring in, or what might your team be able to suggest to create that environment of trust? Social interactions. So we're not just talking about face-to-face or the having lunch together. We're also talking about those spontaneous connections. You know, the ones where you go to lunch and you go to lunch and then you share a table with somebody and you start talking to them, or you go to the kitchen to warm up your meal and you're putting stuff in the microwave and you just randomly start to talk to people. That's the piece that a lot of us are missing. Not the pre-planned, but just the spontaneous stuff. So what might be ways for you to overcome that? And some strategies that I've heard that are really useful are things like having chat rooms. So you could have a parent chat room, or a chat room for people in this field, or so on, where people could just randomly start sharing things and chatting and communicate, so that they can build those social interactions without it having to be planned and scheduled and so on. You can also have online games, game rooms where people can play. I know when I worked in the public service, we at lunch every Friday had board game days. And we'd get together for an hour, have lunch, and play board games. And it was super fun. And the great thing is that now a lot of those things are available to us virtually. And you can do that. Even you can do team building exercises, which I have there. So you can do things like escape rooms. You can have team lunches, coffee dates, breaks. I hear a lot of people having bingo nights together on Fridays. Lots of different training events is another great opportunity. When I do training, I always ask for everyone to have their camera on, to have their microphones working, so that we can talk exactly the same way than if we were in a classroom. It is so important to create those opportunities. The other thing to consider is accommodations, and not just accommodations, but really knowing the difference between equal and fair accommodations. In the public servant, we're really great with accommodating for physical needs. Everybody gets an ergonomic assessment, we get the equipment we need, and so on. But it is clearly a lot more of a challenge when it comes to mental health and well-being needs. And so what I invite you to do is to, as Isabel mentioned, go towards empathy. You don't need to understand or agree with somebody's need, but we need to be listening with an empathetic ear to really connect with that person, because people are really the subject matter experts of their own lives. And if we're willing to listen and to reach them where their individual needs are, we can support them in doing what is best so that they can really perform. Know the differences and leverage the similarities. We don't need to give everyone the same thing. We need to give everyone the things that they need so they have equal opportunities to perform the same way. This is where it's so much more useful for you as a manager to be curious versus making assumptions, and to really co-create, partner with that person. Ask them to tell you how you can support them. Use a coaching approach. The other thing is leverage all technology. So instead of having fear, see it as an amazing opportunity. I work internationally. I work with people in all sorts of countries and cultures and languages, and it is amazing the connections I've been able to make with people online. And I would say that some of them, I have better connections with them than people I've met face to face, because we had to work to create that connection. And the technology that is there allows us to do so much more than we could ever do in person. And so this is what I invite you to do, is leverage it. So learn about it. Lean on people on your team who are really tech savvy, who know this stuff. Make it a challenge for them to figure out how we can work better, and all the different apps and available services out there that can really make working virtually fun. You can do brainstorming sessions using live whiteboards where if I write on my end, somebody sees it on their end. Lots of opportunities to collaborate that way. Chat rooms. You could sit side by side. I've heard of employees who will actually call their colleague on MS Team and have them live on one monitor, work on the other monitor, and they stay like that the entire day, just like when they used to share a cubicle. So it gives them that sense of being connected with somebody all the time, even though they're in their own workplace. You can do consultations. It's so much easier to create accessibility and to accommodate people. If you think of people who have mental health issues, they're more likely to be able to function and work in a virtual setting than if they have to go to a workplace in place. So, and sorry, that was an overgeneralization, but there is a larger percentage of people who will be able to work virtually. You've probably even noticed that your absenteeism numbers go down because people can work even when they're sick, where they wouldn't have been able to go in person. So lots of ways to accommodate people. Privacy and boundaries can still be respected with technology. When you have those virtual backgrounds or that ability to just make the background blurry, you can do face-to-face without invading somebody's private space. So using that is really, really an easy way to do that. Group training can be done. You can use all sorts of apps and integrations to make task and project tracking and to share work objectives and to integrate calendars. So much is available. So I just invite you to get curious, to play with it, have some fun, lean on people who really think this is fun, and see how you can make that virtual setting so much more productive than it currently is. And the last big part is trust. You know, lead by example, be trustworthy. If you're trustworthy, your staff will respect it, and it's a reciprocal feeling. Be transparent and ensure ongoing communication. People are more likely to trust that they're not being left out if they get ongoing communication. That if they know of, you know, so-and-so has been hired, they've been working on our team for 6 months, and I didn't even know, because I don't even see them anymore. So to communicate, to share what's going on, what's happening, it is so important to have that trust. Create shared goals. So again, with performance objectives, it's really great to tell people what is their personal work, but people really look to feel and belong like there's some part of something bigger. So have some shared goals, revisit the mission of your team. What is the vision? What are the overarching priorities? That really helps. And then check in, support, but don't micromanage. Research shows that remote workers spend 9.5% more time at work and are 13% more productive than regular employees. So this isn't something you really need to worry about. The people that didn't perform well in person, you might even be surprised that they will suddenly increase their performance because they're in a different environment. So just check in, support, and see what's happening. What about engagement levels? This is another one I get asked a lot, especially, you know, because we've been going on for a while, and for a lot of people, they've been kind of white knuckling it. They've been holding on for things to go back to normal, and now they're not, and it's like the engagement and motivation level starts to drop. So the first thing I want to offer for you is we need to be on the same page as to what motivation means. There's a misunderstanding that motivation is about a feeling. I just feel like it. You know, I'm motivated when I feel like it. But in fact, motivation is not a feeling. It actually bypasses the emotional center. It's not emotions that make us do something or not do something. And motivation is not mood dependent. So it's not like, oh, today I don't feel like it, so I'm not going to do it. Motivation is actually more linked to us knowing what to do and that we want to do it. If you think of athletes who get up every morning and train at 5 a.m., it's not that they feel like getting up at 5 in the morning to train, is that they know that they want to what they want to achieve and that this is the way they get there. And so what that means that it is really important for us to be clear around what is the direction and to support people to have a focus. So we have to be clear as to what is most important thing from moment to moment. And that's important because we can be highly reactive when we're in panic mode or when our state of mind is not very clear. And so then we just get caught up in all the false priorities, all the things that we, would be nice, should be doing, could be doing, and we lose track of the things that are really important. And so that's to have that distinction is really important, because the departments that are highly reactive or the teams that are highly reactive are the ones that tend to call me and saying, I don't know how to motivate my staff, because they're just mentally exhausted by doing so many things that aren't really important. So that's a big way to boost motivation. Another way I want to offer another look at it, perspective, is that as humans, we are built. Our default setting is to be well, to be motivated, to perform, to be happy. That's our default setting. We're like this beautiful computer that you buy, you bring home, you plug it in, you open it up, and you think, wow, this thing's fast. It has all the software that I need to do my job, and everything's well equipped. That's how we're built. But then when we don't respect how the computer works, and we start downloading all sorts of things and giving it some incorrect data, or using it and like getting viruses on it and so on, it just slows down. And then we wonder, why? What's wrong with this thing? Well, we're not any different. You see, when we start to clog our motivation, clog our prevent ourselves from being in that default state with things like, oh, I should, I need, I could, I have to, all those type of thoughts. Or, after I get this done, then I have this, and this, and this, and this done, and you're going down the checklist. And then you start to worry and ask yourself, well, what if this happens? And what if I do that? And, all of those type of things start to block what's naturally within us. When we don't feel a sense of purpose, when we have immense pressure to be in 20 places at once, or to meet everyone's needs all at once. Again, I'm thinking about those poor parents. And we have unrealistic expectations that we want people to work at the same speed, but yet technology or their Wi-Fi is not working. Or when we just have a lack of acknowledgement of what is, we're just not realistic. These are the things that prevent our motivation and focus to come through. So we don't have to build motivation or to learn how to focus. We got to take the stuff that's blocking it away. Like the images below, the water knows where to flow. It's just being blocked. The wheel knows how to go round and round. It's just being prevented. And if you pull those sticks in that kerplunk game, the balls will naturally fall because gravity is always present. We don't need to learn how to be motivated or focused. We need to take away the things that are blocking us from being truly who we are. So a few questions for you to ponder after this is, what thoughts or beliefs might be blocking access to your own inner motivation? And this is a great question to explore with your staff who are lacking motivation. What might be the things that are playing in their mind that really blocks them from accessing that? How can you shift your mood? So even when you know that times are stressful, how can we shift our mood to still have access to our innate well-being and motivation and desire to perform? And how are motivation and focus interdependent? Can you focus when you're not motivated? And can you motivate without having any focus? So just things to reflect on. And when it comes to increasing motivation, I know you're already doing some great stuff. And just to echo some of that or to build on some of that is check your expectations. You and your staff, invite your staff to check their own expectations. Again, they're the subject matter experts of their own life. So are they realistic in their own situation, in their own context with how they can perform? And increase your own awareness. You know, what are some of the things that play in your mind that are making it challenging for you to feel motivated, for you to feel to be fully present for your staff? Maybe you have some thoughts of your own around technology or working virtually that is just blocking you. Be realistic, set direction for yourself and for your team, and don't forget to have some fun. Work is supposed to be a place where we can have some fun. And even when we do it virtually, you know, life is a lot more productive when we're happy and our state of mind is good. So let's bring some fun into that work environment too. And the last piece is around struggling with boundaries. It's a common one. And one of the biggest challenges when it comes to work-life balance is we have a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of unrealistic expectations or ideas of what work-life balance is. Everything from I can find work-life balance if I just reduce the number of hours I work, or, you know, I have such a fear of missing out, or I have unrealistic standards, or we get stuck in the I should, I must, I'm expected to, and therefore I don't have the right to have a break between the two. But what if work-life balance has nothing to do with that? What if work-life balance was just really about living your life? And the visual that I like to offer you is the story about chopping wood and carrying water. You know, if I invited you out to come camping with me and I said, hey, here's the axe, here's some wood, do you mind chopping some wood for the fire? And you think, okay, great, I can do that. And you start chopping the wood. And then I give you a pail and I say, hey, can you go get some water? We're going to need some water for after. And you say, yeah, not a problem. You go get some water. But if I turn around and then say, now, can you do that in half the time and do it at the same time? And then you wonder, okay, I don't know why you'd want me to do that, but sure, I'll try to do it. And now all of a sudden, the same task that was easy, not a problem, becomes extremely tiring, extremely frustrating, and mentally, you just become tapped. You're just exhausted. We live our life that way, where we think that we can be in two places at once, doing 20 things at once, and then we ask ourselves why we don't feel balanced. So work-life balance is not about reducing number of hours or going on vacation or having strict boundaries. It's about really learning that you perform at your best when you're present in what you're doing. And you can only be in one place at once. And presence, being present, is mental energy. So it doesn't matter if you've worked 15 hours or 5 hours. What will give you that sense of balance is how you spent that time. And that's what allows us to feel energized. And one more thing about the work-life balance. Remember that work-life balance, even your definition of that, can change from day to day. And it's very different from one person to the other, which again points to the fact that it has nothing to do with how much you're working or what you're doing, but it's how you go about doing that stuff that can make it that you feel out of balance. Two things I want to offer you to think about after all of this presentation is, imagine that you put your hand on the stove. Do you stop to analyze the various ways to fix the situation? B, discuss how much it hurts and see how far you can take it. Can I keep my hand on there just a bit longer? Do you start planning with what you will do next? Now, after my hand stops burning, then I will do X, Y, and Z. Or do you just recognize that your hand's burning, remove it, and let the healing begin? And for most of us, we'll go right to D. But notice in life, and especially in the workplace, how many of us will actually go towards A, B, or C. So get curious about that. Maybe sometimes it's just about recognizing when things are just not working, so you could stop doing it, take the thoughts that are taking the motivation away, get curious and have fun with technology, and then move towards what makes it heal and feel better. And the last thought for you is around overcoming obstacles. You know what your obstacles are, or you may discover them. Think of this. A man will be imprisoned in a room with the door unlocked that opens inwards as long as he doesn't think to pull rather than push. How many times do we need to get creative, take a step back, look at the problem, and just imagine that outside of that door, there's a solution. And if we don't know it, perhaps we can lean on our team to have a creative collaboration to find solutions to make working virtually even better for us. So I just see that we got the message saying the questions are coming in. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Marilyn, and see what we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, for the wonderful presentation. You have definitely given me tons of food for thought. I love the way you describe engagement levels, that it's about knowing what to do and knowing the why. It's not about, I feel like it. It's like, do I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it? And I think sometimes folks will say they know what they're doing, but they're missing the why piece, right? And I think our role as leaders is always to revisit that and find out, are we presenting the why properly? Are we indicating the importance of that? Maybe sharing it more openly or having conversations with particular individuals who maybe the why isn't as obvious for some as it is for others. So thank you. That was really helpful. So our first question, Natalie, is what can we do to help an employee who won't shut down or take a break? So works odd and long hours without being asked. So this is not an expectation. There's no overtime agreement that's set. Talks about it with the team and clients, slows down and works at a sustainable pace before they can crash and burn. So this is a manager who's concerned now about an employee who isn't restricting to their core hours, as you had mentioned. So what kind of support could we provide this leader in terms of how they can engage their employee?
So I have so many questions that come up when I see the question, which might be my coach hat. So I'm just going to say my coach hat is on. I'm really curious as to what assumption we're kind of making about that employee. So in terms of, before they crash and burn, I know a lot of employees who can work long days because they're having fun, like legitimately having fun. And I've heard a lot of employees who are saying, man, now that I don't have to travel and I get an extra 2 hours a day, I just start earlier and I go a little later. And I'm perfectly happy with that because for me, I thrive on having that sense of accomplishment. So, and then there's the other scenario where it is not the case, that they may actually crash and burn. And I think that at that point, the only way you as a manager will know the difference between the two is to have a conversation with that person, to really be curious and to openly, share that, hey, like I noticed that you're working all this time. I'm just wondering, are you enjoying that? Is it by choice? Do you feel like you need to? Is the work demand too much? To really have that conversation. And once you know what the answer is, partner with them. So if the first scenario is like, no, I'm having a lot of fun, then you can say, okay, great. I also want you to have a lot of fun outside of work. So how can we work this so that it's a win-win for everyone? And if it's the opposite, then, then find out what they need. Do they need, AKA your permission? Are they that type of employee that's really looking for their manager to say, hey, great work, have a great evening? Or are they that employee who's just really struggling because they have such high expectations for themselves? So you won't know what to do until you explore that. And then to have a conversation with that staff in problem solving with them. Because any solution you try to impose on them will just break the trust and maybe even create some resistance, and they'll just do it, but they won't tell you they're doing it. So keep that open communication, trust that they know, and partner with them to find those solutions.
That's exactly right, Natalie, like open communication. And I think it also draws back to your presentation when you indicated that sometimes employees feel they have to prove they're not slacking off, right? Like you kind of highlighted that seems to be a stat. So I'm wondering if in the course of that discussion, this employee may also be sharing a little bit of that insecurity they might be feeling, right? So that's wonderful. Question number 2. I have and this is a great question because there are times where I have done this. I have an employee who joined our team in August and has yet to show herself on video calls. Should I respect this or should I ask to see them? So I don't think it's just a bad hair day scenario because that seems to be all the time.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you've hired somebody and you've never seen them face to face. And so unless you did an interview, because I know some interviews happen by phone. And so, I would just get curious. I would just say, hey, I'm just wondering, I noticed that we haven't seen you face to face, and for your peers, that would be really neat for them to get to know you. So that one day when we're back in person, we all know who's who. How can I support you so that from time to time you feel comfortable being on cam? There might be a lot of things going on home. Maybe they're just really not good with technology and they don't know how to blur their background and they don't want to share that private space. Maybe they just don't know how to show up on cam. So maybe explore that option with them.
Yeah, sometimes it could just be a technical thing.
Maybe.
Right? Like their camera doesn't work or they've pressed it and it's not showing up. But yeah, great. Third question. And this has to do with expectations, which was one of the key themes, right, that our NMC survey, when we did that this fall, showed managers coast to coast were concerned about expectations. So as middle managers, how do we cope with unrealistic expectation and pressures that are often non-communicated from our director or above in a way that protects our team and protects us?
Oh, there's so much context that I feel like I missed it on that question. So it's hard to really. Okay, so as a middle manager, how do I cope with unrealistic expectation, pressure, non-communication? There's a lot there. Okay, so what I'm hearing is whatever's coming from above you is really impacting you, and that you recognize that for you and your team is not realistic. So besides the context there, if the roles were reversed, what would you want? And I bet you the chances are you'd want somebody to tell you. If it was your employees feeling like what you were pushing down was unrealistic, you would want them to come to you and reach out and say, hey, I'm really struggling. So my best advice is to treat those the way you'd want to be treated. And in this case, open up, share with them. And I can't get more specific because I don't have the context, but that's just my gut feeling is they're people too. Yeah. Check in with them.
Yeah, good. I mean, fair point. Perhaps it's not noted that the expectations were giving too much pressure, right? And maybe have the courage to just have that conversation and feel comfortable in that space.
Mm-hmm.
The next question, how can we better engage introverted staff? This has come up time and time again because, when we're on video and we're chatting, it tends to lean towards extroverted employees. So how do we engage our introverted staff who are very quiet and don't communicate as much? It's hard to build tight teams with individuals who are on the outside, I guess what looks like they're on the outside looking in.
Yeah, so first I have to clarify because introverted doesn't mean that we don't participate. Introverted is that we tend to get overstimulated when there's a lot happening. So your introverted staff are probably really thriving working from home. And so if they're thriving because they're in their zone, they're more comfortable, they can limit the stimulation or the external stimuli, chances are that they're probably more apt to participate. They just may not want to do it in the way that an extrovert might want to do it. So I invite you, whether it's virtual or in person, have them choose some of the activities. lean towards them to tell, from time to time, they can choose the AK social activity, because even introverts like to be social. They just might do it differently than an extrovert. So ask them, it's really engage them to solve this problem.
Yes, and I love that, because I think on Twitter months ago, there was a big tweet exchange that said, working from home, introverts are loving it. Like, yes, they're thriving in this environment, right? Because they can focus, they can really barrel down on what they're working on and not feel all the external pressures. So thank you for sharing that. The next question, does working as a manager from home encourage micromanagement?
Nothing encourages micromanagement. That's the short form. Micromanagement is really an approach to a response of something that is blocking the manager from trusting, essentially. So when we work in a virtual setting, if you notice that your approach tends to be more micromanagement and it wasn't in person, it doesn't mean that it wasn't in person. It's just virtually, the things that used to challenge you in person that were kind of handled because you could see people are just heightened when you're working virtually. So what I invite you to do, and this is not a judgment, you're human, you're doing your best. If you're catching yourself micromanaging, the first great thing you can do is become aware of it. And then get some support in terms of learning how to overcome those internal challenges. Remember, I shared being that brand new computer. You too are built to thrive and to support people and to have empathy. You just might have some thinking or some patterns or some beliefs that make it difficult for you to connect that way. So perhaps get some support, some training, or speak to somebody about what it looks like to let go and to trust people that you can't see working.
Okay. Daryl or Isabel, did you also want to perhaps share something along that? It's a pretty big question. It's nice to get different perspectives. Okay. I will. Oh, Isabel, did you want to share something?
Well, I do think that it doesn't change really not seeing people daily in the office. So you just have to learn to trust the employees, your employees. And again, having communications is key. If you know what your employees are working on and how they are also doing their work and what their hours are, all those various tips that Natalie gave us, I think will help you really not micromanage, because you will fully trust your employee, you will know what's going on. So really keeping open communication, I think, is also key to not falling into micromanagement.
Yeah, I would just add, build on that same point. In those of you that have heard my little tips and tricks that I share every now and again with the NMC, one of them is the biggest thing that I've learned in my career is to trust. And as you move up from an employee to a supervisor to a manager to an executive, et cetera, you have no choice, because you can't possibly be on top of everything. And even more so now, where you're not running into your staff. But I've heard from people that lend themselves to be micromanagers for all kinds of reasons. There's things that you can do to put in place to help sort of scratch that itch in terms of sort of regular check-ins, just to keep yourself sort of up to date on what's going on. But I find the opposite, because I'm the opposite of a micromanager. I think I have to make myself check in on things. So somewhere in the middle, we need to find a happy medium. But it's all about, Natalie, I think recognizing it is the first thing, and then figuring out a way that's going to work for you. You don't try to quit cold turkey, but go from there.
Awesome. And it's wonderful that they've both shared that. Both, I think, have teams that, are working across the country in different time zones. And that's very difficult to manage a team within those environments. So it's nice to hear from managers who are actually sharing their experience. I think we have time for one final question, Natalie, and that's about onboarding. So how do you onboard a new employee remotely, and how do you set the workplace culture if they're not exactly there? Like, how do you know that they understand their expectations?
exactly the same way you do it in person. and the reason I say that is because I've actually created onboard manuals when I was in government and was a manager. I had lots of staff. And you know, the first thing you do is you have a meet and greet with them on the first day they arrive. You make sure they have all their equipment ready for them. You send out an email to everyone saying welcome. You book them with specific people to do training. So it's exactly the same thing, and except that maybe at first you also have to create a bit more of a social events or opportunities to socialize online because you can't just assume that it's going to take place because now they're not there virtually. And you may require for the rest of your team at first to do all meetings face like with the camera on to really build that opportunity to integrate everyone, to have a face-to-face, to get to know everybody's voices, just so that person really feels that welcome that they normally get in person. But besides that, everything else is pretty much the same. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. At this point, I'm sad to say that our session has come to an end, and I'd like to pass it over to Isabelle Racine for our closing remarks. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie, for all the great tips. I took so much away from your presentation. The information and tools we all shared with you today will definitely be helpful as we try to lead and keep our teams engaged through these challenging times. I would like to thank you participants from coast to coast for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you as well, Natalie, Daryl, Marilyn, the Canada School of Public Service, and the NMC team for coordinating this event. We at the NMC hope you will all join us for the next Managers Managing People virtual talk taking place on December 1st, when we welcome Kathleen Clarkin and Jason Fox from RoCro for a discussion on remote work and the future of work. Over the next 2 weeks, the NMC will host several regional events, including topics on virtual work, mental health, and resilience. So I greatly encourage you to follow our Twitter handle at NMC_CNG, Facebook, and our newsletters for all updates and registration details. Your feedback is very important to us, and I invite you to complete the electronic evaluation that you will receive in the coming days. Until then, best wishes. À la prochaine.